Hey there, students. In this lecture, I want to give you a brief introduction to one of my favorite philosophers, John Stuart Mill, who was a classical liberal English philosopher in the 19th century. And Mill is most famous for writing 3 books. Those 3 books are On Liberty, Utilitarianism, and The Subjection of Women. And these books all have a common thread, and that common thread is John Stuart Mill's advocacy of liberty. So let's give you a brief introduction. This isn't going to get too into each of these books, but let's go ahead and tie them together. The first of these books is On Liberty, and the central question of On Liberty is to what extent can society legitimately exercise power over the individual? Now keep in mind that Mill is a classical liberal. He believes, kind of like the justice system, that you're innocent until proven guilty, that someone should be free unless there's a reason that they shouldn't. So in On Liberty, he's looking to investigate the rightful use of government or societal authority and what should be the limits. And guiding On Liberty are 2 maxims of liberalism. These maxims are, first, that the individual is not accountable to society for his actions insofar as these concern the interest of no person but himself. So in my own life, society has no legitimate function in telling me what I can and can't do, as long as this just concerns me. Now, when can society get involved? That's the second maxim. Secondly, that for such actions as are prejudicial to the interest of others, the individual is accountable and may be subjected either to social or to legal punishment. So if I do something to hurt somebody else, then that could be a problem. That is something where society legitimately can step in and say, no, you can't do that. We are going to punish you for that. Think about something like alcohol. Okay, so alcohol is something that only hurts someone if they abuse it. So we're not going to take it off the shelves. But then at the same time, what about laws about drinking and driving? Well, someone who's drinking and driving could hurt somebody, so the state has a legitimate interest there. And in the book, Mill goes into all kinds of scenarios where he is employing these maxims to try to investigate the legitimate extent of government power. We'll save more in-depth analysis for another lecture sometime, or I'm sure there are other more in-depth analyses on YouTube. The second of Mill's Liberty trilogy is Utilitarianism. Now what Utilitarianism is this is a way of looking at morality. That instead of saying this action's right, this action's wrong, right, wrong, instead of that, it looks at the result. And a utilitarian, instead of saying that it's never okay to lie, it's never okay to cheat, it's never okay to murder, it's saying, okay, well, let's look at this action, let's look at the consequences, and we're going to determine right from wrong based on what results in the greatest good for the greatest number of people. So an action in and of itself has no intrinsic value. An action is neither right nor wrong. It is only right or wrong in its effect. Is it resulting in a greater amount of pleasure or a greater amount of pain and suffering? And that should be how we look at things. Now, here's the kicker, where Mill says, okay, greatest good for the greatest number. Well, how do we determine that? Some people might say, well, we need some people, some really smart people to get together and a central authority to figure this out. Not so for Mill. Mill says that really what's going to result in the greatest good for the greatest number of people is liberty, is letting people make decisions for themselves. And kind of like Adam Smith's Invisible Hand. Okay, let's get this ready. Like, ooh, Invisible Hand. All right. So kind of like Adam Smith's Invisible Hand, where he says that the most economic justice is going to happen when people can do things for themselves and make their own decisions. Whereas Adam Smith is applying this principle to liberal economics, John Stuart Mill is applying this to liberal social relations. So in order to guarantee the greatest good for the greatest number, we need to let individual people do what they believe is best for them, as long as they don't hurt others, of course. The third book in this trilogy is The Subjection of Women. Now, as a liberal, John Stuart Mill resents any kind of social distinction, any kind of hereditary nobility, any kind of legal privilege. Well, the classical liberals, they spoke out against legal privileges for the nobility, for the church. They spoke out against protective tariffs, which inhibited trade. But the earliest classical liberals didn't really address what was the biggest legal privilege of all, and that was the legal privilege of sex. That there were opportunities that were denied to women just because they were women, and they were reserved for men just because they were men. Now, Mill lived in a society as a member of Parliament. Women couldn't serve in Parliament. In 19th century Britain, women couldn't even vote. And John Stuart Mill was as successful as he was as a philosopher and an author because his wife helped him go through his stuff. His wife was his best friend and closest intellectual confidant and his editor. And for John Stuart Mill, seeing that he had all of these opportunities that his wife didn't, he didn't believe that this was fair. He didn't believe that this was in line with liberty. So John Stuart Mill puts himself out there as one of the first male feminists writing The Subjection of Women. So there you have it. John Stuart Mill, a philosopher of liberty, wrote On Liberty, where he investigates the limits of government power, Utilitarianism, where he advocates morality based on the greatest good for the greatest number, and what's going to result in that? Liberty. And then finally, the third, The Subjection of Women, that if we're really going to be free, we need to allow all of humanity to be free, not just half. If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, go ahead and give it a thumbs down as long as you engage with it. Subscribe to my channel. I'd love for you to come back for some other lectures because for right now I'm done, but I will be back and we'll talk about some more history and philosophy and all kinds of great stuff. Comment. Tell me what you thought. All right? But for now, I'm going to get a little drink of water and head home for the day. Until next time.